being checked out. Do you know that we all have guardian angels that go around wherever we go? What does your guardian angel look like? Do you know? Have any idea what he looks like? Is he green? You don't think so? Does he have wings? I have yes, and I've got no. Do you know, I think I saw my guardian angel. I even talked to him. It was one day I was getting ready to preach a sermon, and I was up at the pulpit, and the door opened, and in walked a young man with blonde hair, a white T-shirt, and jeans. And I invited him to come in. I'd never seen him before. Invited him to come in and to sit down. I said, I'm going to have the sermon, and then afterwards I'd like to get acquainted with you. I thought it was somebody from the community. So he sat down, and after I preached the sermon, I went up to him and shook his hand, and I said, hi, I'm Pastor Bob. What's your name? And he says, Sandy. And I says, Sandy what? Oh, just Sandy. And I says, well, I'm glad that you're here, Sandy. I says, our church is going to have a fellowship meal. I need to talk to my head elder for a moment, but if you go out into the foyer, the ladies are preparing the meal, and they'll set it out, and then you can sit and have a meal with you. That'd be okay? He said, sure. So he went out there, and I was talking to the elder, and so after I was finished, I walked out into the foyer, and it's a large foyer, and we had the table set up there, and on one side was this couch, and Sandy was sitting on the couch, but I thought, well, here's what's strange. There are 4 children from one family, 4 children, and they're all under the age of 6. And they were the wildest kids in the world. When church is over, they would bounce off the wall and run and jump and yell and scream. And mom was a single mom, would try to keep them quiet. You think they'd be quiet? No, they wouldn't be quiet. Just made them even noisier. But what was strange was these kids were sitting next to Sandy and not saying a word. And I'm going, whoa, that's a miracle right there. So I went over to talk to Sandy for a minute, and he said, hey, I'd like to talk to the men of this church. Can you get them together? And I said, sure. So brought them together. And Sandy says, I don't have a Bible. Can I borrow a Bible from someone? And one of the men says, well, here's mine. Give it to you. And so he gave it to Sandy. And so this is not Sandy's Bible. This was another man's Bible. And he says, now look here, I'd like to share some text with you. And he's still seated there. And I'm behind the couch and I'm watching. And he says, now it says in Isaiah, and he turns, never looking at the Bible. And then he says the chapter. And then he says the verse, and he never looked at the Bible. He pointed exactly to the verse and read the verse word for word, and his finger went right across it. And I'm going, whoa, what's going on here? And then he says, then it says in Matthew, and he never looks at the Bible, and he turns to Matthew. Now, I turn to Ecclesiastes. I can't turn to Matthew without looking. And then he said the chapter, and he said the verse, and he put his finger on it, and he read it, verse, word for word, and his finger went right along with it. And then he'd go to another text, and he did that about 5 or 6 times, never looking at the Bible, holding it up in the air. I could see him from back behind. He always turned to the exact book, the exact chapter, the exact verse, and point his finger across there. And I'm going, wow. I wonder who this guy is. And remember, it isn't even his Bible. It's someone else's Bible. And so he closed it, he sat down, and he ate with us, and we had a good visit with him and everything. And then he says, it's time, I've got to go. And by the way, his message to the men was, Jesus is coming soon. You are the leaders of your house and your church. Get your people ready for the second coming of Jesus. What a message. He says, I got to go. So I walked into the church, and it has the glass doors like what we have here at the church. And I'm standing there, and he gets out. You know what he gets on? A Harley Davidson motorcycle. and he starts it up. And then he drives out of the parking lot and he gets onto the street and he turns and he goes down the street, which goes straight to the highway that's down there. But I couldn't see him anymore because of the trees. But I could hear his motorcycle go down, so I knew he was heading down to the highway. And just then, there was another couple that was coming that were members of the church who had visited one of the other churches on Sabbath morning. But they came because they wanted to visit with some of their friends. So they came in, and I knew their son, Travis, was sitting in the back seat, and he loves motorcycles. He could hear a motorcycle, and he could tell you what the make and model of that motorcycle was and how big the engine was and everything. I mean, it was just unbelievable how just listening to it. And I said, Travis, I said, did you see that motorcycle going down the road? You passed it on the way. You had to. You know what he said? What motorcycle? Where did it go? I think when I get to heaven, after I see Jesus, that's who I really want to see is Jesus. But when I get there, probably behind me, I'll hear a voice and say, Pastor Bob, and I'll turn around, and there is a blonde man, maybe wearing a T-shirt and jeans, and says, hi, I'm Sandy. I'm your guardian angel. I welcome you here to heaven. Do you think? The Bible says, be careful who you entertain and make sure you entertain strangers because you might entertain an angel and never know it. So be kind to the strangers. Show them kindness and love because it might be your guardian angel. And then if it is, tell me if they ride a Harley-Davidson motorcycle, okay? Okay, you can go back now.